Welcome back to Double Fries, No Slaw. It is St. Patrick's Day, Richie. We're a day late, but we're here anyway. And appreciate everybody tuned in. Double Fries, No Slaw, presented by Guthrie's, powered by BetUS TV. We'll give some love to Garnet and Gold and Rhoback here in a little bit as well. But Richie, how's your St. Patrick's Day? Do you have a drink? Do you have a Guinness? Or I have a 0.0% like boring Guinness because I'm still not drinking, but I did pour one for this, so.
No, we got some Smittix. The wife's making some homemade shepherd's pie tonight. I'm happy I get to wear my hat from Ireland that I never wanted to wear again, but that's okay. But yeah, no, we love St. Patrick's Day. The wife is pretty Irish, and I did the ancestry DNA. I'm like 7% Irish, so I'm claiming this holiday as my own as well. We'll probably watch The Departed or Boondock Saints tonight. We love St. Patrick's Day, but we're definitely beyond the age of going out to like an Irish bar or something.
Dude, there's a really cool one right by my house I drove by it today because I just went to Publix and it was hopping. And I'm way past the point of that too. And I'm drinking this fake beer. But I love an Irish bar. I mean, that was what was so cool about Dublin. Like Dublin was so much fun, and the bars we went into and did all that out there. And this would be a holiday I would like to get into more so for the food. Like I love a Reuben. I love corned beef, like all the shepherd's pie, like all that stuff. The pot roast and everything we ate over there in Ireland was great. And then I'm a huge fan. I like the Guinness. I'm corny. And was looking for some green food coloring to throw in something, like a beer or something. Not this, obviously, but couldn't find any, so we were out. But yeah, this is a fun holiday that I'm sitting at home spending time there. Yeah, I'll tell you what we watch every St. Patrick's Day, and it's an obscure reference, but my wife has latched onto this, and this is what we do. We watch The Fugitive. Because remember the part in The Fugitive where they dye the river green, and it's set kind of around. It's not a St. Patrick's Day movie by any means, but it is. They dye He's in Chicago there on St. Patrick's Day. They dye the river green. It is referenced. He walks through the parade to kind of get away from Tommy Lee Jones at one point. And so because there's like a 30-second, it's about as much of a St. Patrick's Day movie as Die Hard is a Christmas movie, I guess. But it's because it's set on the movie. Well, it's set on that day, so I guess it has to be a St. Patrick's Day movie. But anyway, we do watch that.
Real quick. You remember the Temple, the bar that we did the live show from Dublin in?
Yeah.
So we listened to, there's a local radio show here that we watch the live stream every morning starting at 6 a.m. before we go to work. And they were keeping tabs on a live stream video from the Temple. And I was like, holy crap, we've been there. Like, that's pretty cool. And it was, I think it was 11 a.m. at Dublin time. And it was jam-packed, and people were getting rowdy. So took me back to my college days when we'd wake up at 6 a.m. and go straight to the bar.
I'd be a big fan of going to – okay, so like doing stuff on holidays. Like I feel like you almost just challenged me to a bucket list of like going to Dublin on St. Patrick's Day. That'd be really cool. I've told Kara before, this is a completely different vibe, so I'm sorry for using this comparison. I've told Kara before I want to go to the Holy Land on Easter one year. Like I think that'd be cool. Like to be there I know that's very different than Dublin on St. Patrick's Day.
That'd be cool.
But number 3,
if you're domestic, I hear it's Chicago or Savannah are the two best options for St. Patrick's Day.
So number 3, I'd like to go to London on 4th of July one year, just to gloat. So, all right. All that said, before I get in trouble, let's get on with things. Double Fries, No Slaw, brought to you by Guthrie's in Tallahassee. You can visit all 3 of their locations if you want some chicken for your St. Patrick's Day, which doesn't feel very Irish to me, but go for it anyway if you want to. 1818 West Tennessee, 2550 North Monroe, and 2870 Apalachee Parkway. Appreciate Guthrie's for their support. Richie, let's jump into things. Again, a day late, but we kind of did this intentionally because Mike Norvell met with the media and had some updates, some things that we'll talk about here out of his conversation with the media. First off, a change here in spring football. The media being locked out of practices, kept out of practices, Norvell kind of changing his stance on the way that they will do spring football, right? You get 15 practices. There's no spring game this year. And for the first time in his 5-year tenure at Florida State, really the first time in his tenure going back even further than that, because he had similar policies and procedures and processes there at Memphis and before. But no longer allowing the media into practice. And I cannot wait for the comments on this video. But a lot of people, oh, this is good, this is bad, doesn't matter, whatever. I have got some takes here. I've pros and cons like everything else in life. But what's your initial reaction to that?
So I think it's a very odd decision. And I do wonder if, the only person who could potentially have influenced that, obviously Michael Alford never had a problem with it. But the addition of Gus Malzahn, I do wonder, because I know he kept his practices fairly closed at Auburn. I don't really know what his policy was at UCF. You think about when Bobby was there, and I covered Florida State, on the beat in person, and Bobby would let us in the practice, full access. He would let fans into practices and just standing on the sidelines there. And then Jimbo just came and shut everything down.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on wins or losses. But, he had a lot of allies, and he still does, in the media, especially on the beat, those ones that cover them. I bet they're probably split half and half, like, all right, well, good. I don't have to waste, 3 hours of my day every single day. I can just show up for, post-practice interviews. But at the same time, they've been given all of this access for the past, 4 years. And now out of nowhere, he makes this drastic change. And it is drastic because it's not like, a lot of coaches will let you be in for the first, 3 or 4 periods, which is just basically stretching and quarterbacks warming up and things like that. And then once they start getting into their plays and everything, the media kind of gets escorted out. But for him to just completely shut things down, I don't want to use this word lightly, but it almost seems like a move of desperation just to try and change the narrative of what might be going on. So we can say, hey, this is how serious I'm taking things. Last season was not what we wanted. I'm not sure, but, and we talked about this off air just a little bit, but I just do not think it's a good look to change your media philosophy in year 5.
Yeah, and you mentioned Gus. I think that's an interesting point of this because I certainly think there's some validity to that or potential validity to that. Although if Florida State would have gone 9-3 last year, right, or 10-2, or even really 8-4, do you think this change? Even with, first of all, Gus might not even be here. Let's be honest. But let's say they went 8-4 and Gus did still come. It's hard for me to imagine that if the real issue is not the record, right? The real issue. It's hard for me to think that a 10-2 Florida State team that brings Gus Malzahn in, because things were shaky for UCF, right? And if Florida State goes 10-2, does Atkins get a call somewhere else? Does do some things? Now he had the show cause, so maybe not. But LSU hired him just fine, so it's not like the show cause was going to hurt anything. He's working with the tight ends. So I don't know. I get the Malzahn, that's how he did it. But again, if this team won 9 or 10 games, 8 games even, I don't think they're closing practices, right? And I kind of agree with you. Like, I don't, Mike was very deliberate on, no, we're very confident. He said this in press conferences. Like, somebody shared a clip with me, and we're not going to necessarily play it. Like, that may come out later. But somebody shared a clip with me where Mike Norvell, like in an FSU press conference, like, hey, no, we're very confident in who we are. We believe in transparency. We believe in, like, we have nothing to hide. Now, with that comes some, don't be reporting on formations or injuries or packages that we're putting out. Like, don't screw us over. There were some rules on that. But I do think to go from, hey, yeah, we're confident in who we are, we're comfortable with who we are. I think it was asked to him after they were either 0-4 or after they were struggling in 2020, his first year, the COVID year. And he said, no, we got nothing to hide. And then to basically say, we got a lot to hide is pretty interesting. I do remember, there was some talk of after some of the practices of just how the team looked. And some guys reporting on just, man, they didn't look very confident. They didn't look like they were into it. There were some real issues. No one player was called out, but just some of that narrative that was happening in the season of, yeah, these guys don't look like they give a crap about being out here. If I'm Coach Norvell, I don't really want that out there. And whether you think he's right or wrong about closing practices, I can understand it. I wouldn't want that out about my team. Now, I think that it's probably more important for you to fix the problem than fix the reporting on the problem, right? I've never been a big fan of, oh man, the media is letting this get out. Well, I'm not really so much worried about the media telling the truth. I'm more worried about the actual problem, which is the fact that players didn't feel like they gave a crap about being here last year. But I do think that, I don't know that I love it. I don't think it's a great look. I'd tell you, in watching both the way that the Jimbo tenure ended, and watching the way that the Taggart era ended, and watching the way that eras have ended at UF and other places, one of the first things you notice is that there's a change with the media, and there's a change in the way that teams are covered. There's a change in the way that the coach and the program have a relationship with the media. It becomes a little bit more hostile. And I'm not saying that we've gotten there. I'm not saying that, not at all am I saying that that is where we are right now. But if there's some struggle this year, if things don't start out the way you want them to, say you lose to Bama and then lose on the road to Virginia, you got Miami the next weekend, you got a real chance to be 2-3. Does that media, we've already locked them out of practice, you've already changed your strategy and you've limited them. Does that kind of media fight start? I don't know. I'm not saying it will. I certainly, as an FSU fan, hope it doesn't. I hope we go 12-0 this year. I want Mike to win every game that he coaches for the rest of his life. But I do think that it's interesting, and again, not a great look.
Yeah, and I am curious, to listen to see what some of the beat reporters who are, on site every single day, what they think, because that completely changes their business model, right? They're used to having this all access where they can report on things, despite, obviously they're not going to report on if a player gets injured in practice or anything like that. But they are going to report on certain things. And you and I luckily have the freedom of, since we are not at practice every day, we can report on a lot more things than all these other media outlets cannot. But my wonder is, what happens if, a war chant or 247 just gets annoyed and they just start reporting things that, Mike Norvell does not want out there, but that's all they have to report on because they no longer have the access that they wanted. And they're not going to pull their credentials because you need to have the coverage. You're not going to find any more friendly media outlets than the ones who cover strictly Florida State. And ESPN's going to report anything they hear. I can promise you that. They don't care. Sure. So it's just an odd move, in my opinion. And I think this could be considered an unforced error on Mike's part, just to completely change things the way he has in terms of media coverage of practice.
Yeah, my overall thought I don't think it makes a massive difference one way or the other. I don't even think it makes a very small difference.
Not in terms of wins and losses, no.
Yeah, not at all. Like I don't, and honestly, to tell you the truth, I don't think it makes a very big difference in the way that the team is covered either. I think that the way that most of these reporters have sources within the program that are not on staff, but maybe they're ancillary staff, right? Like they're guys that don't necessarily have an agenda, right? Like if your source is, Alex Atkins, right here is the OC last year. I mean, he's got kind of an agenda that he wants to push things around. I think they have enough sources outside. I mean, I'll just tell you, like that's usually who I'm talking with. That's inside of practice. They're like minor staff members, like kind of low down on the totem pole that are kind of giving you information and stuff. And they'll just kind of be honest with you of like, yeah, this is what happened. This is what didn't. I think they'll actually be able to report on practice a little bit better than they have or more than they have because they won't have those kind of safeguards on them. And so I think a lot of that stuff that was coming out anyway is still going to happen. And so if you're Norvell, like you make this decision. And again, shoot, I hope it works out. I hope we get to the end of the year and we go 12-0 and he says, you know why I think this happened? I think it's because I kept the media out of the practice. I got to be fine with that. Do I think that's realistic? Like, not at all. But I don't know what this really helps. And coming off of a 2-10 season, it very much looks like you got
it's just a bad look. Yeah.
If you did this after 9-3 or 10-3 or something like that, like I think people just say like, hey man, you made a decision. You thought this was best for your program, whatever. I think doing it after 2-10 makes it look like, hey, we're canceling the spring game. Understandable reason. We're canceling the spring game. We're canceling media access. It looks like you're kind of hiding something. And when that's been the opposite of what you've done forever, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. I don't think it makes a big difference in the long term or the short term of what happens with FSU. Everybody makes a big deal about like injuries. Unless it's the quarterback and you've got two quarterbacks that are just very different, right? Like a Jordan Travis and a
Brock Glenn.
Brock Glenn. Yeah, just two quarterbacks that have very different styles. Jordan and Tate, right? So unless it's that, no other coach really cares that much about injuries. I mean, the NFL is the most successful sports league in the country, and they have a mandatory injury report. The SEC does a mandatory injury report. Like, say even like a Jared Verse was going to be out for you on Saturday. That's not changing the way that a coach game plans. They're still going to just run what they think is effective. So again, outside of like quarterback, I mean, that advantage of injuries not getting out, like what's that good for? Like one play, because once that first play happens and Keon's not out there, it's like, oh, okay, well, we know, and as a defense, like, are you game planning differently if Keon's not out there? Not really. You're still then you're putting your best cornerback on the next guy. Like you know it on play two. So I think most of that's overrated too. Like the hiding of injuries that Norvell tries to do. I don't really know how much that benefits FSU. Like, have we ever won a game because he kept an injury secret or whatever? So like, that doesn't even matter to me, but I don't know. It's different. It's weird. And again, it's just not what he has done forever. And so anytime you make a big change like this, people, we didn't talk about this really quickly, move on. People talk about the beat getting things wrong last year. I know that, I don't know, this may not be popular with people. I don't really care about that either, because you know who else got things wrong? Nick Saban and Vegas and, the AP poll got things wrong. Every person that even thought about Florida State last year got things wrong. So the beat getting it wrong doesn't really matter to me. But yeah, like maybe he felt like there was added pressure because the beat put too much pressure on them. Again, I don't think it was the beat that voted them top 10 in the country to start the year. I don't think it was the beat that gave them the highest odds to win the ACC or make the playoff in the conference. But again, the beat, I think, gets a little bit of extra crap there because they are the ones that report on practice. But again, they're not the ones that put the expectations on Florida State. That was, national media as well. That was Vegas as well. That was the AP poll as well. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Anything else before we wrap up?
Yeah, just real quick. I don't blame the beat at all. Because I was on the beat for 3 years in Tallahassee, going to every practice, every game in the press box. And where the beat gets a lot of their confidence from is typically from the coaching staff. And a lot of what they were told last year and the information they were giving was directly from Mike Norvell and his assistants. It's as simple as that. It's like they don't come out and say this offensive line is going to be amazing based on what they see in practice, because and no disrespect to anyone against the beat, I never played football at a high level. I got to high school, I started a few games at wide receiver. I caught a 2-point conversion once. I'm amazing essentially, but no, the fact is that there are a lot of off the record conversations that happen that you don't hear in press conferences. So they weren't just making stuff up; they were being fed information from Norvell and his staff. And I think Norvell and his staff were overconfident in what the team was going to be. And the beat simply reported on that. So I give anyone on the beat a pass because I've been there. I've done it. I know how that works.
All right, let's move on a little bit to actually do this. Richie, do me a favor and give Rhoback some love, and we'll move on to another thing that Norvell talked about.
Yeah, Rhoback.com, RHOBACK.com. Use promo code DFNS20. You will get 20% off your first order. They have the best performance joggers, shorts, hoodies, polos, whatever you can imagine. A ton of great Florida State gear. It's never too early to start gearing up for next season. They also have a lot of neutral gear that's just really good and comfortable to wear. I wear the joggers probably more than I should, but definitely use our promo code DFNS20 and you will get 20% off your first order. Great for golf, just going out to do groceries on a Sunday after church, whatever it may be. It is a phenomenal product. And I would promise you, if you buy from them once, you will buy from them again.
All right. So Norvell was asked, I think by Zach, so speaking of the beat, was asked about making some changes to his staff due to their recruiting over the last couple of years. And obviously Norvell did that, but it was good to actually hear him be asked about this pretty directly. And Norvell admitted he made some pretty extreme changes to the staff based on recruiting. Now, I will say, I think that last year's recruiting class was probably based on record, was probably the best one he's had so far. Now, it's not the best one he's had, but finishing
2 wins.
Yeah, finishing 12th when you win 13 games to me, it's almost more impressive to finish 19th when you win 2 games, right? Nah, I mean, obviously the 13th ranked class is likely better, and has more of an impact down the street. But anyway, so funny enough, I thought, this year was maybe the best job he's done yet, by getting into number 19, as weird as that is to admit. But the recruiting just hasn't been good enough. The focus on high school hasn't been good enough. And I think he knows that and made some pretty big changes. I guess my big question would be, do we see it pay off? Do we see it matter? I want to say yes, because I just don't know if it could be much worse. But at the same time, are they able to capitalize on that, on some of the changes that they've made with Malzahn's SEC ties, with his ties at UCF? Obviously, you'd think like some relationships that he would have had there, some of the ties the Nebraska guys had. Like, how big of a difference can that make? Your wide receiver coach coming from South Florida, I think that's a big deal. But you've got to certainly win to back it up. Although I will say, wins and losses matter. But as much as it pains me to admit, I just watched a Florida team have 7 regular season wins. They had 7 wins by the time signing day happened, and they came away with a top 10 class. I think they finished like 7th or 8th. And so, yeah, I mean, wins and losses are certainly important, but good recruiters find a way to recruit. And, I don't know. I think it was good to hear Norvell admit changes to recruiting, because for a long time, I don't mean this as a dig or a slam, because I like Mike a lot personally. And I think he does a lot of things really well as a coach too. Don't get me wrong, but I have long held the opinion that he just didn't care about recruiting. Like, that's the vibe. I mean, if Tiger doesn't change his stripes or whatever you want to say, I have a tough time believing that he truly cares, that he hasn't shown in his efforts that he truly cares. And be that, landing the top tier talent that he goes after every year, be that being willing to pay for guys and up the bag at times to keep the big dogs away, or be that holding coaches accountable for their failures, right? And he's never going to go up there on a signing day press conference and say, hey, yeah, we struck out, we failed. There's a kid that plays safety that flipped to Georgia at the last second. We're pretty upset about it. He's never going to say that, but we all know the reality of it. And so I don't know if anything's truly changed on his perspective on it. But I do think it's good that he at least admitted it. He at least admitted, hey, yeah, I'm trying to get better in this area, because it has. I mean, listen, this isn't a slight against any kid that's come in. Recruiting at this university has been a massive failure for about the last 7 years, maybe the last 8 if you include Jimbo's last season too. How many top 10 classes are there in that last time frame? Like, any? Have we had a top 10 class since 2017? I think recruiting has been a pretty big failure for the last 7 or 8 years at this university, considering what this university has done in that time frame. You've had, you've had a lot of losses. Don't get me wrong, but you've also won an ACC championship. You've had a couple of 10-win seasons in there, and again, your rivals are recruiting laps around you, and they don't have more wins than you over the last 8 years. Like, it is very even. So anyway, hopefully the changes that he's made will make a difference. Sorry, I've rambled there, but I'll give you a chance to throw in a couple of cents too.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, Jimbo did not recruit at all at his final year at Florida State.
Yeah, I included 17 in there.
I firmly believe he knew he was going to A&M in September of that year, right after A&M lost to UCLA, but that's another topic for another day. We'll have another few slow weeks. Maybe we can deep dive into that. But yeah, I think Mike's biggest problem, which was a blessing and a curse, is he just struck gold in the portal so many times early on, right? Nobody wanted Johnny Wilson. Nobody wanted Trey Benson because of his injury at Oregon. Jared Verse was highly sought after, but he was still from Albany. Then you think of like a Braden Fisk and Kier Thomas and Jarian Jones. His hit rate was, looking back, it was clearly unsustainable. And I think he just thought in his mind, I'll get who I can get out of high school, but I'll just use the portal to fill my roster every year. And then last year we brought in a ton of portal guys. Did any of them really work out? Like, you won 2 games, so I think the answer is clearly no. You had no postseason accolades. So I think he got a little too comfortable in the portal, and now he realizes, oh crap, high school does matter. And I think, imagine the trajectory of his high school recruiting if Travis Hunter doesn't flip on signing day to Dion. And that was going to happen regardless. It was. The safety that you mentioned that flipped to Georgia. This staff or Mike Norvell's staff as a whole, because I know it's changed a bit, they have failed to close on signing day. Not only flips, but guys that they're in the top 3-4 that you feel really good about, and they just pick other schools. The high school recruiting does have to improve, and the fact that he's finally acknowledging it, I think that's really important. And for him to publicly acknowledge it, I think it is a positive sign, in my opinion, because that's not something you publicly acknowledge. Most coaches would be like, "Oh no, we're going to recruit the guys we want who fit our culture." A lot of coach speak. He's just coming straight out and saying, "Listen, yeah, we need to do better," and we do. And I think he realizes that. And what I love about the Gus Malzahn hire, I'd love that he's going to take over play calling and let Mike be more of a CEO. But he's played the dirtiest of games, right? In the SEC when it comes to recruiting. Like that's just a fact. It cannot be disputed. So he knows how to play the game. NIL, I don't think Florida State's going to get outbid by anyone, quite frankly, unless it's just egregious. If Ole Miss has the money, Texas A&M has the money to where they could extremely overpay for a player based on market value. So those are going to happen in the NIL era. But for the most part, if all things are even, NIL is even, I do think we will see improvement when it comes to recruiting.
Yeah.
Especially at the high school level.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Like, he did hit in the portal, but like, even when he was hitting in the portal, like Travis Hunter flipped in 2021, that was well before like a lot of that portal success. Keldrick Falk, who is killing it at Auburn, right? Starting defensive end, kind of linebacker, jack position type player, absolutely killing it. I think he was class of 22, so before we had seen the hit rate of John, like we had Johnny in the boat, but like we didn't know that he was like that guy yet because he hadn't played a game yet.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, like even, and then he's continued to miss on those top targets.
Yeah.
And flipped away
every year.
And 2017, that recruiting class, Jimbo's last, give a damn recruiting class, right? So like the recruiting class that was signed in February of Jimbo's last year was 6th. We did finish.
And I'll say bust after every single bust. Go for it.
Say what?
Name the top guys of that class, and I'll tell you who was a bust because there was a lot.
In the 17 class, so they finished 6th. I'll do it real quick. The 17 class had Cam Akers, really good. Kane Doe, Marvin Wilson, LeBourne was a bust for sure. DJ Matthews, not very.
But was LeBourne a bust because he went on and killed it once he left Florida State?
No, he busted at FSU. So
yeah,
Stanford Samuels was in that class. Trey McKitty was in that class. I like Trey McKitty. Bailey Hockman was in that class. Remember him? Ontario Pokey Wilson.
Yeah, the lefty.
Yeah, Pokey Wilson was in that class.
Pokey was a good
one. There were certainly guys in that class but like that wasn't a bad class for sure. Cyrus Fagan, who went on to NC State. Hamza Nasruddin, he was pretty good for a time.
He was awesome.
Yeah, that was a good class. Since then, no top 10 classes. Number 18, so Willie's first year, we did finish 11th. That was, actually better than. Now there were a lot of.
Let me say something about that real quick.
That class had a lot of busts, and then 24, you had a top 12 class. But yeah, no top 10 classes since 2017. That's actually crazy to think about at Florida State University.
Yeah. So, and Willie, credit to him. He had literally, I think it was 10 days to put together a class. So by no means do I blame him, but he added a ton of, high 4 stars and mid 4 stars, the last few days before. But again, if you're a high 4 star
from California,
if you're a high 4 star and you don't have a home, 5 days before signing day, there's something going on there.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not going to make any assumptions about any teenagers, but there's a reason if you're that highly ranked and you don't have a home yet, that there's something going on there.
Something wrong.
And people know that. The coaches know that.
So we'll see. It's got to get better. To be very honest with you, I don't have great expectations. I'll tell you this. Let's wrap up with this. What are your expectations? I'll give you mine first, but what are your expectations for this FSU recruiting class? Let's assume Florida State wins between 7 and 8 games. I think that's fair, right? Their over-under is 7.5. We're not going crazy saying that they're going to win 10, and I'm also not like so much on the doom and gloom that I say they win 4 or 5. So let's say they win between 7 and 8 games. They're more competitive this year. I don't think they're super competitive at Clemson. I do think Bama wins. Let's say they win between 7 and 8 games. My realistic expectation is that this needs to be a top 13 to 15 class. Now, do I think that's good enough at Florida State? No, I don't. I just think there are a lot of teams ahead of them that are ultimately going to recruit better. I think when you look at, the landscape of college football and you think about like the teams you're not going to out recruit this year. Like, I don't really see a way that you out-recruit Oregon and Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia and Notre Dame and LSU and Michigan and Ohio State and, let's be very fair, probably either one of, if not both, Florida and Miami. And so, I just gave you 10 teams, and I probably left somebody out. Penn State recruits really well. Texas A&M recruits really well. Clemson recruits really well. USC recruits really well. Ole Miss, I think you could beat Ole Miss. But I'm just telling you, I don't see how you recruit a lot of those teams I just mentioned. So I think your ceiling is probably around 12. But if you can finish 12 to 15 this year by going 7 and 5, 8 and 4, I think. Am I okay with that big picture? No. Am I okay with that understanding where we've come from last year? Probably.
I think 5 years in, you need to be top 12 every single year, because my theory is it's a 12-team playoff, right?
That's a good point. Yep.
So you would at that point think you have a roster that is capable of making the playoff every year, and it's going to expand. I don't know if it'll expand in the next year or two, but it will expand. But my thought is that anything outside of the top 12 is a complete failure. Because I think Florida State every year should be a top 10 class. So I'm giving you 2 spots of leeway. And if you cannot figure out a way to get in the top 12, that's an issue in my opinion. And, as that buyout goes down year after year after year, and you continue to sign the 14th ranked class and the 19th ranked class and all of this, and your coaching is not doing what it needs to do, he's not going to last. And I know we weren't planning to go there, and I love Coach Norvell, and I think Mike Lawford is a phenomenal AD. I'm just not sure Norvell's going to make it, because I think recruiting is his biggest downfall.
Yeah, it's tough to see what the path is at this point if he can't get. Now, listen, right now they have a top 10 class. In fact, they might even be top 5 right now.
Stay in there, and he's going to be fine.
Yeah, they've got a really good class. And so there are chances, there are ways that you could actually, they dropped a little bit. I'm sorry. When they lost their quarterback, they dropped a little bit. I take all that back. Yeah, it's got to get better. And we'll see if it does or not this year. Harlan, I'm going to throw you a curveball, but I've got this. You can just come back to it whenever. I do want to give BetUS TV a little bit of love. Right now, they have odds up and available for the national championship in basketball, the NFL draft, early college football stuff that you can go check out. Check out all of their sports coverage on all social media platforms at BetUS TV. We certainly do appreciate them for their support. If you want to get real crazy and drop a bet on Florida State to win the national championship, you could certainly make a lot of money doing that. If you want to go anti-bet the Gators here in March and cheer against them, that's probably what I'll be doing during all of college basketball. But anyway, appreciate BetUS TV for their support. All right, Richie, talking about basketball for a minute. I know we don't do as much basketball here. We talked about Ham a little bit while he was making his exit. But West Virginia got absolutely FSU'd. I want to talk about one more football thing here in a minute when we get done with this, so nobody tune out on us while we complain about committees. This will probably be what you guys care about the most, though, to be honest with you. West Virginia led UNC in every possible aspect of who deserved to get into the tournament. In fact, I sent you a tweet that that West Virginia was in all of the predictive brackets, they were in the tournament 111 times out of 111. They're the only unanimous team ever that didn't make the tournament. They had 5 or 6 quad one wins, whereas UNC went 1-9 against quad one. North Carolina, just absolutely not the year that they certainly hoped for. However, they do get an invite into the tournament. And Richie, you remember how much we hated Boo Corrigan a couple of years ago for not doing what this year's committee chair did. I know you already know this, so I'm building up suspense for something you already know. What if I told you that West Virginia fans have a bigger gripe right now with the chair of the NCAA tournament committee than we ever had with Boo Corrigan? Because we were kind of asking Boo to scratch our back a little bit and be an ACC guy that gave us a little bit of a preferential treatment because we were in the ACC. What if I told you the team that got in ahead of West Virginia, their athletic director, Bubba Cunningham, was literally the chair of the committee that selects teams to get in? Obviously, wink, wink, nod, nod. He's supposed to go out of the room when those things are discussed and happen, but let's not pretend this is, elementary school where you go stand out in the hall while your friends take a test. Absolutely insane that West Virginia gets left out and that Bubba Cunningham at the center of it.
So I definitely thought that, especially when we were texting earlier today about this. But at the same time, there's no metric that's, the end all be all. But I truly think Ken Pom is the best metric when it comes to college basketball. And I looked it up, and North Carolina was 33rd in the Ken Pom, and West Virginia was, I think, 55th. So, that's a huge difference. And again, Ken Pom is not the, the gospel, so to speak, of what happens there. But if you look at what happened on the court, and I think one of the tweets you sent me, someone cited that one of their players for West Virginia was not available, but he had not been available for 3 months.
They tried to use the Jordan Travis thing like nobody was watching.
Yeah. In what world does that make any sense? And if that's the argument you're going to make, you could make an argument to me and I would agree with that. But if that's your best argument, then there's clearly an issue. But what I always say when it comes to the tournament, when it comes to snubs and whatnot, is that simply, there's 68 teams that get a chance to represent their university in the NCAA tournament. And it's not like football where there was only 4 when Florida State got clearly snubbed. So if you're the difference between 68 and 69, you don't have an argument, in my opinion. You just don't. You had your chance. You could have won a few more games. You probably had a game or two that you were up a few points and dropped late. It happens. And so in the basketball tournament, I'm not a huge believer in. I don't believe there's ever a snub. Yeah, when it's Florida State who does not get in, they're always snubbed. In my opinion, if they're close, right? If they're on the bubble. But at the same time, again, when there's 68 teams, no. But I think the more important point is that you should not have athletic directors.
Active athletic directors.
Yes, active athletic directors. And I know they'll say, oh, well, they leave the room when we talk about their team.
Do you believe that? Do you believe it?
No.
I don't even believe it.
I do believe it, but at the same time, they know who left the room just now.
Right. It's not like it's, he's hanging out with them for hours at a time. You don't. Yeah,
they're going out for drinks at night.
Right.
How this stuff works. I trust me. I know how.
If you left the room right now and me and Harlan had a vote on you, we would probably do it in your favor because we know you're coming right back in the room. What are we going to say when you get back here?
Even if I'm not deserving.
Right. Yeah, we're going to be a jerk. Hey, man, we got some bad news for you, Richie.
I don't like that. I'd rather have a bunch of random basketball analysts who, report on the college basketball from all sorts of the country, right? So not just from the Carolinas or from the South, but finding random people who can objectively look at this and say, if it were me, put me on the committee. Because I promise you, even if the state was not qualified, I would say so. I would say, no, I don't think they're qualified. You need objective people. And when you have a school paying you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, you're not going to be objective. And the fact that he is on that committee is ridiculous to me.
Yeah, it's also the idea that he certainly couldn't talk about North Carolina, but he certainly could talk about, and I'm not saying he did, right? First of all, I've got a couple of thoughts here. But like he certainly could talk about the other teams that were on the bubble, right? The West Virginias, the Indianas, the teams that got left out, and say like, hey, here's why. So yeah, he can't talk about North Carolina, but he could certainly like poo-poo on West Virginia or Indiana, or say like, hey, like, here's why I don't really like this team. Okay, I can't discuss North Carolina. Again, having an active athletic director. Who did you see? I don't know if you saw this or not, but did you see that in Bubba Cunningham's contract, he gets it's a little over $100,000 bonus if North Carolina gets into the tournament?
Insanity.
That is crazy.
That is not okay.
Again, maybe it's all above board. Maybe he was out. Maybe he didn't have any discussions on teams 58 through 64, right? Maybe he didn't talk about that at all, right? They just said like,
that's insanity.
That is crazy. And so my proposal would be, number one, exactly what you just said. Like no active athletic directors, no active members of universities being on these committees, because that's asinine and just stupid. Like, why is that a thing? And listen, I'll even tell you, Michael Alford, I don't know if he still is, but Alford was on the baseball one last year. I love that because I'm an FSU baseball fan, but I don't necessarily think that that's right or wrong, or not right or wrong, not right. Like, I love it because I know he's going to go to bat for us, even when he's got to go outside or whatever. But
I like the baseball pun there. I like it.
Do I? Yeah, I didn't even try to do it, but I'm actually impressed with myself. But yeah, I don't think it's right. And so so if they won't do that, which they probably won't, because there's too much money in all this stuff, and so they probably will leave these guys on. Why not make these meetings? Dude, could you imagine? So like the selection show that we all watch, right? Whether it be football or basketball or even the baseball one, that's kind of interesting. Could you imagine if they made these committee discussions transparent? Could you imagine if they made them open? Like, I would tune into that.
Live stream for $5 a person.
Yes, I would tune into that.
Because I would watch every single minute of that.
Now, you know what I didn't?
Hours.
You know what I didn't watch the last 2 years, really? Even the year that Florida State was kind of in it and in the discussion, I went back and watched them.
Selection show.
The selection show is one thing. The weekly updates on what the committee has determined or said or what they're
I never watched those.
Terrible. Now, I watched the last few weeks because I wanted to see what they would do with Jordan's injury, but like I never watched those because they're just meaningless. They're made for TV. They're contrived, whatever. I would love to be able to see inside those committee rooms when they're actually having the discussions. I don't need a rankings reveal that doesn't tell us anything, that doesn't really give us any thought process. But if we could have literally seen him go out of the room, and then we could have seen them discuss why they thought North Carolina was over WVU, and not this PR answer that they gave later, right? Yeah. The actual conversations that were happening. Listen, then we can see the transparency. Then we can see, you put Alabama in over Florida State. That's fine. But we want to see your conversations. Why did you change your mind from weeks 13, 14, and 15? Why did you change them now after the conference championship weekends when a third string quarterback played? Why did you do this? And then I think that would settle a lot of this conspiracy that we've got. Because again, maybe everything was above board. Maybe none of the board members had an idea that Bubba Cunningham was going to get a $100,000 bonus for them making it in. I don't believe that. But maybe it was all good. Maybe there was no controversy. But just show us that. And that's why, it's just a crock. North Carolina is, are they the biggest? Duke's way up there. Duke's probably number one. But they're the top 3 or 4 college basketball brand in all of.
No, they're number one.
Are they above Duke even?
Yeah, definitely above Duke. And I think that's probably because
would it benefit a lot
more alumni.
Like if this was benefiting like St. Mary's or something, right? Like, I don't know, just Wake Forest, right? If this was benefiting one of those, Florida State or Florida or whatever, which Florida's got a good brand too, don't get me wrong. But like, it's the fact that it benefited the best brand out there, whose AD was on the chair.
Basketball. And honestly, I don't think it's close. I know Duke's a big one, but North Carolina is by far the biggest, and they can thank Michael Jordan for that. But yeah, that's truly where, I've seen studies on it. They are the biggest brand in college basketball.
So for that to be the way that it goes, yeah, that's pretty crazy to me. So
like Alabama was the biggest brand in college football when Florida State got passed over, which pissed me off because I knew in ESPN, and you will never convince me otherwise, they knew Nick Saban was going to retire. They knew that. There is no doubt in my mind.
So WVU fans, I don't know how many of you will watch this, but we do at least feel for you. We've known your pain. Richie might not at all because he doesn't care about team number 69. I very much care about team number 69. But no pun intended. But Richie doesn't feel any sympathy for you, but I do a little bit. UNC screwed you over. All right, last thing, and then we'll get over here. Let me get some Garnet and Gold love. GarnetandGold.com. Listen, it's probably a little bit late to shop for St. Patrick's Day stuff, but listen, if you need like 4th of July, FSU themed gear, if you just, whatever you're looking for, baseball, softball, women's hoops in the tournament as well. They play on Wednesday night. If you need any kind of FSU gear, make sure you're shopping at GarnetandGold.com. NOSLAW, NOSLAW gets you 15% off. Always remember that code, NOSLAW, to get 15% off of your Garnet and Gold order. Appreciate them for their support. All right, last thing I wanted to point out, and something that Norvell said today that I thought was pretty interesting. You can go check out his full press conference over at the Seminoles.com YouTube channel, was how big of a key leadership was for this team. And, we talked about practice being closed and stuff last year. Man, I heard some awful things come out of practice, stuff that didn't really get reported on. But I heard about times where players were telling coaches like, no, I'm not doing that. Times where coaches would tell players like, they're big on like, if you mess up on a rep, you go back to the front of the line and you do that rep again. Big time players, like guys that have transferred out, thankfully, but big time players, big time names were saying like, throwing their hands up and saying like, nah, I ain't doing that. I ain't going back to the front of the line. I ain't doing this. I just heard some from people that were there, right? People that have no agenda, have no reason to lie. Like there was a bad, and maybe that's again why practice is closed a little bit, because Coach Norvell didn't want that kind of stuff being seen again. And obviously you'd hope that stuff's not even happening, not just not being seen. But he talked about how big of a key leadership was. And he talked about, for all the guys they brought in, that was one of the number one things they looked for in guys that they were bringing in through the portal, through high school, wherever, was leadership, because there were no leaders on this team last year. I think that was pretty apparent. Not only was there a lack of want to and effort, there was no Jameis Winston or Jared Verse or Jordan Travis that would go out and grab somebody by the face mask and say, you better get your butt in motion and get going. They just didn't give a crap because there was no leadership. And, when we spoke with Dylan Gibbons a few years ago on Spaces, and I remember him saying, I remember Josh asked him, like, what is Alex's leadership style? Like, how does he impact you? And he's like, to be honest with you, like, when I first got here, it was pretty intense, but he trained us how to be leaders. And so Coach Atkins doesn't really, he leads us in a sense, but he's not like down our throats or, on our backs for leadership. It's us. Like, we're the leaders, and us older guys that Dylan was going into his second year at that time, we're the guys who are going to very much be the leaders now. And obviously you didn't have that last year. Again, it's hard to read into a lot of things. I'm not telling you that Florida State wins X number of games because Norvell focused on leadership. It didn't seem like he cared about that last year. It didn't seem like there was that emphasis on it last year. I think it's a good sign for Florida State that it is there this year.
Yeah, it's a cliche saying, but I think it's truly accurate. Whether it's, youth basketball or the NFL, the best teams are always player-led teams. You go back to, if you've never watched it, guys, go to YouTube and type in FSU One Team, One Heartbeat. And it has a bunch of locker room scenes before and after games from Florida State's 2013 season. And you see the leadership that team had. Again, player-led teams. James Wilder, Tim Jernigan, Jameis, obviously. And we had no player-led leadership last year. And that was obvious. And honestly, I think if you could account for it, you're looking at you're probably making a bowl game if you had a group of leaders that were truly accountable. Instead of 2-10, 6-6 is still unacceptable at Florida State, but you probably could have got there if you had player-led leadership. And I think that has had to be extremely frustrating to Mike Norvell, because he had always had player-led leadership the few years leading up to that. Jared Verse, obviously, Trey Benson, Jordan Travis, Jerrion Jones. Again, I'm naming off a bunch of transfers, which goes back to one of our earlier segments that you got to get better in high school. But at the same time, you could have the best motivational coach ever. Bill Belichick is probably the greatest coach of all time in NFL history, but is he without Tom Brady and his leadership abilities? Probably not. I mean, that's just the way it is. You need to find players who are leaders who can, pick up those talented players that just need a little motivation, that just
Yeah.
need a little direction. And if you can find those players, they got to be good players. In the past, Florida State's had some bad teams where players have tried to be leaders, but they just weren't any good, quite frankly. I won't name any names, but I could think of a center from Jimbo's last team who tried to be that guy, but he, quite frankly, was terrible, and other players didn't respect it. But if you find good players who are also good leaders, you're going to have a really good team.
Yeah, you're right. It does have, and it does so much have to coincide with your good players. I thought about basketball just very quickly. And yeah, you look at the leaders on teams, whether it's Steph or LeBron or Michael or Kobe or Dwayne Wade and Shaq back at Miami, like whoever. Your leaders were guys that could get in other people's face and say, like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Like Phil Jackson never had to coach anybody up, right? Neither had Michael or Kobe doing that. Steve Kerr didn't have to coach people up because Steph will do that. All of LeBron's coaches, like, what was Spoelstra in Miami didn't have to coach people up because LeBron was doing that. Wade was doing that. They were in guys' faces saying like, hey man, step your game up. And so football's the same way. Do you think Bruce Arians was really, Bruce Arians is a great coach. He wasn't coaching guys up. Brady would absolutely
go watch The Last Dance if you haven't watched it, guys.
Yeah, Brady would absolutely
all you need to know.
Light people up if they weren't doing things right. And so, yeah, the leadership on the team just wasn't very good. And you're right. Yeah, you probably account for a couple more wins if you do have some kind of leadership on there. What I think is interesting there is really how the guys will respond to Castellanos. And from all early reports, and you have to be very careful with this because the coaches aren't going to say anything negative. But from all early reports, it does seem like the team has responded fairly well to him, and he is a likable guy. You obviously still have in the back of your mind the way that things ended at Boston College not being super positive with Castellanos, but you'd hope that, he doesn't have to go out there and have a Heisman type season, but even if he just has an above average season, a good season like he did last year, I think his touchdown interception last year was like 18-5. Like it was pretty good. And so even if he can just give you a little bit of that success and give you a little bit of that promise against let's call it what it is, a pretty bad ACC, I think you're in a much better spot. Listen, I hate giving credit to our rivals, but did you see the way the Gators played for Lagway? Did you see the way that they played for a real leader? Did you see the way Miami in multiple games being down multiple scores? And I know it was great that they fell off at the end. That was awesome. But did you see the way they played for Cam Ward in some of those early season comebacks? Now, certainly they should have never been in some of those games. They should have never, the Cal game, the Virginia Tech game, the Louisville game, those shouldn't have been as close as they were. But you see the way they rallied and they played for that guy? Like, I hate giving them credit, but like, they play hard for their leaders, and I think that that's a big difference. And, I'm not telling you Florida State would have won as many games as either one of those teams or anything like that. But you're right. Just a little bit of leadership, a little bit of like grabbing a guy by the face mask and saying like, hey, we're going to get things going the right way. I think that's a big deal and something that was really, really missing last year because your coach, you've played sports, even though we didn't play at the highest level, you played sports, that eventually you're just going to tune out what your coach says, right? Like eventually he's said enough. He said the same things over and over and over again, and it just comes down a different way. But when your brothers tell you to do something, it's just different. And so I don't know, we'll see. Again, it makes me sick to give credit to those guys, but you look at and again, it's just so, all that said, it's hard to have true leaders have quarterbacks that aren't true leaders. Like that's really tough in my opinion, because those are the guys that you just have to look to. And look when Florida State's been successful, whether it's Charlie or whether it's, whoever, Weldon, Chris, even Ricks and stuff. Like back then, he wasn't super liked, but like a leader, Drew Weatherford, super, like guys like that can lead a team, whether they're elite or not, Ponder and EJ and Jameis and Jordan. Like DeAndre Francois commanded the team, and had good leadership qualities. And so, it's really hard, I think, when your quarterback doesn't have that. It is something that, I'm not telling you that I think Castellanos is going to be some great leader or anything for this team, but I do think it's a massive upgrade over where we were.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, to your point, you talk about you don't even have to be the best player on the team, but man, when your best player, look again, I'll reference 2013 again. When your very best players on each side of the ball, in my opinion, obviously Jameis, and then Timmy Jernigan. They were clearly the two biggest leaders of each side of the ball, and they just were not going to lose a game. It was not going to happen. And Thomas Castellanos does not have to be Jameis Winston. He just has to be a solid player who commands the respect of everybody in the room. It's no different than the business world. When you have someone who is a leader of a high performing department and they show up to a meeting with other leaders and they start talking, but you know that their department is very high performing, they're going to listen. It's just human nature. And I think that's where we need to get to. I don't know who it'll be on the defensive side of the ball, and we can only hope that it's Castellanos on the offensive side of the ball.
I know this might sound crazy, but I'm putting my money on Daryl Jackson on the defensive side of the ball.
I think him returning and being so in his money year, and I know he's a very vocal player. If he can stay focused and play the way that he can play, I 100% agree.
Yeah, that's my early pick for kind of who we'll see take that over, and it would be a welcome sight for sure. Richie, any shout outs or anything before we get out of here?
Yeah, I know I get on him a lot and I call him a whiny little baby, but I got to give a shout out to Rory. The wife and I went up to the PGA Championship on Saturday. I was at work this morning watching the playoff, and he just straight out came out and just took that championship today. So shout out to Rory for his 28th PGA win and this year's PGA Championship.
I'll shout out the stick sports. Softball plays Alabama on Wednesday, and then the second highest ranked ACC team in Duke this weekend. All 4 games on the road. So they're in Tuscaloosa, and then they're in North Carolina to play Duke. Obviously a huge week against 4 games against ranked opponents, and lost to Bama last year at home. So you'd like to get a little bit of payback there if you can. And then baseball goes down to Miami. They play Mercer on Tuesday. They go down to Miami Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Their starting rotation for FSU's baseball team is insane right now. So it'd be nice to go down there and get a sweep. You certainly need to win the series, but a sweep down there in Miami would be great. It'd be 6 in a row against the Canes with back-to-back sweeps both years that we've seen them play. So shout out to both of them. It'd be nice to have an 8-0 week from those stick sports. So we will see. Appreciate Guthrie's, appreciate Garnet and Gold, BetUS TV, and Rhoback for their support. We'll be back to Sunday next week. I think we'll see though with the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about that as soon as we get off here. But back to probably normal time next week. If not, we'll let you know. But appreciate you guys for tuning in. As always, we'll talk to you soon. Go Noles.
Go Noles.